They laughed when he went quiet. They thought he'd given up. They thought his silence meant defeat. But what they didn't know was that silence is where men are reborn. If you're watching this right now, maybe you know that feeling. When you stop explaining yourself, when you stop chasing people who never understood you, when your energy just runs out. You used to talk, you used to care, you used to defend your name, but now you don't even bother. You've reached that breaking point where noise no longer matters. That's where his story began. He wasn't weak, he was just tired. Tired of being misunderstood, tired of giving his best and getting betrayed for it. Tired of trying to prove his worth to people who were never listening. So one day, he went quiet. No announcement, no anger, just silence. And that's when they started laughing. They said, "What happened to him? He used to be so loud, so full of ideas." They whispered, "Maybe he finally realized he's not as good as he thought." They smiled, because his absence made them feel powerful. They thought they won, but he wasn't gone. He was just rebuilding. See, silence is misunderstood in this world. People think it means weakness. They think if you're not showing up, not talking, not defending yourself, you've lost. But the truth is, silence is the language of strength. It's the sound of a man gathering every broken piece of himself and preparing for something far greater than revenge. Rebirth. He started spending time alone, really alone. No texts, no parties, no fake smiles, just him and his thoughts, and at first it hurt like hell. Because silence forces you to face the truth, the real truth, that most of your life was spent trying to please people who never cared. You realize how much time you've wasted trying to prove your worth to the blind. But the deeper he sat in that silence, the clearer everything became. He started remembering who he was before the world told him who to be. Before the heartbreak, before the disappointment, before the noise, there was a boy who dreamed big, who believed in himself, who didn't need validation to move forward. And slowly, that boy started waking up again. He began doing small things in private, reading, journaling, training, learning skills no one knew about. He stopped trying to be seen and focused on being prepared. He realized something powerful. You don't have to announce your growth. You don't have to prove your pain. You just have to become so unshakably strong that the world notices your silence more than your words. And that's what he did. While they laughed, he was learning. While they gossiped, he was healing. While they doubted, he was transforming. Every night he sat alone, looking at the ceiling, reminding himself, "They think I'm done. Good, let them think that. Because when I rise again, I'll do it so quietly, so powerfully, they'll have no choice but to notice." See, most people never understand the beauty of going quiet. They fear solitude. They run from it. But solitude, that's where men find their fire again. That's where your spirit becomes untouchable. Because when you learn to walk alone, when you learn to live without applause, without validation, without attention, that's when you finally become free. He started to see things differently. Every person who left him, every friend who switched up, every fake smile, it all started to make sense. They weren't losses, they were lessons. Every time someone betrayed him, they pushed him one step closer to his real purpose. And he began to smile, not out of arrogance but peace. Because he realized the truth, they didn't break him. They built him. They just didn't realize it yet. You could see it in his eyes now. Calm, focused, untouchable. He didn't need to argue. He didn't need to prove his worth. His silence was loud enough to shake the world. Because here's what happens when you go quiet. You stop chasing people. You stop explaining yourself. You stop trying to fit in places you've outgrown. And that's when life starts shifting in your favor. He started waking up earlier, moving with purpose, working in silence, while everyone else scrolled, doubted, and complained. He wasn't loud anymore. He was disciplined. He wasn't emotional anymore. He was focused. That's the thing about silence, it's not empty. It's full of answers. Every day he was building, brick by brick, his strength, his peace, his focus, his future. And while the world was busy laughing, mocking, doubting, he was turning his pain into power. Because when a man disappears, it doesn't always mean he's lost. Sometimes, it means he's loading. That's the stage he was in now. Quiet loading. preparing for something the world would never see coming. He wasn't the same anymore. His silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was control. He had learned to control his emotions, his reactions, his energy. And when a man learns control, he becomes unstoppable. They still laughed. They still doubted. But what they didn't know was that every laugh, every doubt, every moment they underestimated him was fuel. He didn't need their validation. He didn't even need their respect. He only needed to remember who he was before the world told him to be nice, humble, soft, and small. That old version of him, the one who over-explained, who cared too much, who tried to please everyone, that version was gone. He had buried it in silence. And from that silence, a new man was rising, not bitter, not vengeful, just focused, calm, dangerous. The kind of man who doesn't need to talk about what he's doing, because his results will speak for him. And deep down he knew they'd regret ever laughing, because one day they'd see him again, and they wouldn't recognize him. Not because he changed his face, but because he finally found his soul. They laughed when he went quiet, but they stopped laughing when they realized his silence wasn't retreat. It was preparation. See, a man who learns to move in silence becomes unpredictable. He no longer reacts, he responds. He no longer argues, he acts. He no longer seeks approval, he commands respect. The first thing he did was set boundaries. He stopped giving his time to people who drained him. He stopped explaining himself to those committed to misunderstanding him. He stopped letting guilt control his decisions. He realized something simple, but life-changing. Not everyone deserves access to you. Your kindness doesn't mean you're available. Your loyalty doesn't mean you owe everyone your peace. So he pulled back, not out of hate, but out of self-respect. And that confused people even more. They said, "You've changed." He smiled and replied, "I finally have." Because the truth is, growth always looks like distance to those who never evolved. He started to move differently. His energy became rare. His focus, razor sharp. He wasn't chasing opportunities anymore, he was creating them. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was becoming the man he always promised himself he'd be. Every morning now had purpose. Every night ended in gratitude. He no longer scrolled through the lives of others comparing his journey. He was too busy writing his own, and here's what hit him one night as he sat under the quiet glow of a lamp. The world doesn't respect talkers. It respects doers. People can doubt your words, but they can't argue with your results. That realization flipped a switch inside him. He started working in silence, putting in hours when no one was watching, studying when others were sleeping, creating when others were complaining. The grind became sacred. His routine became armor, and every small victory, every private milestone, was a whisper to his soul saying, "Keep going." He wasn't after revenge anymore. He was after rebirth. Because what's more powerful than proving someone wrong is proving yourself right. And that's what he was doing now. See, when you stop wasting energy on noise, all that energy returns to you. Suddenly, the gym feels lighter. The mornings feel alive. Your focus becomes dangerous. He started taking care of his body like it was his temple, his mind like it was his kingdom, and his peace like it was his crown. Every time someone doubted him, he smiled quietly, because he knew what was coming. They were still talking. He was still building. And slowly, the shift began. People who once ignored him started watching again. Friends who laughed started asking for advice. Those who called him arrogant now called him disciplined. Those who called him lost now called him focused. But he didn't care about any of it. Because when you truly rise, you don't rise for recognition. You rise for redemption. You rise to become the man you needed when you were broken. And that's who he had become. He no longer needed to explain his silence. His silence explained him. You could see it in the way he walked. Calm, unshaken, grounded. He had stopped reacting emotionally. He had learned to listen more than he spoke. Because power isn't loud. Power is still. And the stillest man in the room is often the most dangerous one. He started speaking differently too. No more over-talking. No more trying to fill the air with noise. Every word now carried weight. Every action carried intention. He didn't beg. He didn't chase. He didn't argue. He simply let people feel the absence of the man they once took for granted. And that absence spoke louder than any speech ever could. He learned the art of walking away, gracefully, silently, and permanently. Not every battle needs noise. Not every betrayal needs revenge. Sometimes, the best way to show them what they lost is to simply outgrow the version of yourself they once knew. And oh, he outgrew it all. The old habits, the old friends, the old doubts, everything that once drained him, now no longer touched him. He had become untouchable, not because he was cold, but because he was healed. That's what silence gives you, clarity, and clarity gives you power. He realized that his greatest weapon wasn't his anger, it was his peace. His greatest move wasn't proving them wrong, it was showing them that he didn't need to. And his greatest victory wasn't being loved again, it was learning to love himself without permission. Now, his days were quiet, but powerful. His life was simple, but fulfilled. He didn't chase attention. Attention found him. He didn't seek approval. People respected his discipline. Because that's what happens when you go quiet and rise. You become the kind of man others whisper about. The kind they can't figure out, can't read, can't predict. You move differently. You think differently. You live differently. He had gone from being the man they laughed at to the man they now couldn't ignore. And that's when it hit him. All that pain, all that doubt, all those lonely nights were necessary, because the man he is now could only be built in silence. The silence that once broke him is now what defines him, and while the world was busy talking, he was busy becoming. Now he's unstoppable, not because he's the loudest, but because he's the calmest in every storm. And deep inside, he knows this is just the beginning. They laughed when he went quiet, but they never expected silence to echo this loud. It started small. A few people noticed his glow had changed, not loud, not showy, just different. He carried peace like a crown now. He walked like a man who had finally found himself. He didn't rush anymore. He didn't explain anymore. He didn't try to prove anything anymore. Because you reach a point where you stop seeking validation and start radiating truth. And that truth doesn't need to shout, it just is. One morning, as the sun rose and light poured through his window, he smiled. Not because life was perfect, but because he was finally at peace within it. He realized the war was never with them. The war was always with himself. And the moment he stopped fighting for their attention, he started winning his freedom. That's the shift they never saw coming. See, when a man heals quietly, he becomes a mystery. When he starts loving his solitude, he becomes unstoppable. Because no one can control a man who doesn't fear being alone. Now when they see him, they fall silent too. They can't explain it, but they feel it. The strength, the calm, the gravity of a man who found power and peace. The same people who once mocked his silence now watch in awe. The same world that doubted him now asks how he did it. But he never answers. He just smiles. Because he doesn't owe the world an explanation for his healing. He walks through life like a man who's already won a battle. No one else even knew he was fighting. He doesn't post about it. He doesn't brag about it. He simply embodies it. His silence had become his loudest statement. His peace, his revenge, his evolution, his answer. And deep down, he knows something most people never will. Sometimes the only way to truly win is to walk away quietly and never look back. Because walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's the final act of a man who knows his worth, and now life respects him. Doors open without noise, opportunities come without begging, love flows without chasing, because that's how the universe works. When you value yourself, it mirrors that value back. When you protect your energy, life protects your purpose. When you stop proving your worth, the right people start seeing it. He no longer needed to be seen to feel worthy. He no longer needed to win to feel powerful. He was already enough, and that realization, that quiet, humbling realization, is what made him unstoppable. So now, when he looks in the mirror, he doesn't see the broken version they laughed at. He sees the man who rebuilt himself in silence. The man who learned that solitude isn't loneliness, it's rebirth. The man who discovered that peace isn't found in noise, it's earned in stillness. He walks out the door, the morning light wrapping around him like armor. The world feels different now, not because it changed, but because he did. And as he takes that first step into the day, there's no anger, no bitterness, no need to prove anything, just quiet power, just calm victory, just the undeniable presence of a man who turned every insult, every doubt, every sleepless night into fuel for greatness. He became everything they said he couldn't be, without saying a single word. And maybe that's the lesson for all of us. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to fight to be respected. You don't need to explain your worth to anyone. Just go quiet. Work in silence. And one day, the same world that overlooked you will whisper your name with respect. Because when a man goes silent and chooses peace over noise, that's not surrender. That's evolution. And when you evolve in silence, life itself bows in response.